Thank you for joining us here this evening. I am Marty Stone, one of the assistant town managers. Joining us here this evening is the other assistant town manager, Sean Purvis. I think you may see him on screen. Town manager Catherine Crosby is with us as well. From Water Resources, you have Water Resources Director Michael Deaton, Environmental Manager Jessica Boland, and Field Manager James Misiano. From Public Works and Transportation, you have Jose Martinez, who is the director of the department, and you have Chad Lemasters, who's operations manager. So just to give you a little bit more understanding of what these people do, Michael Deaton on the water resources side is taking care of mostly stormwater complaints and all the development that goes on, and all to the point that we get stormwater infrastructure built. And Public Works and Transportation basically maintains public infrastructure. So they all play a part in our stormwater program here at the town, which we'll get more into that as the evening goes on. Some housekeeping measures. If you're attending the seminar or this webinar and would like to post a question, please do it. Any question you have in the Q&A panel. If we do not get to your question tonight, then please reach out directly to Mr. Deaton or Mr. Martinez, and they will reach back out to you and get you an answer. And this session is being recorded, and we will include contact information at the end of this webinar so you have everyone's information. There may be a slight delay in questions being answered as we filter through the Q&A questions to make sure we're getting the right person to answer your questions this evening. And again, we are recording it, so you can always go back and visit that. So again, thank you for joining us here this evening, and I hope you find this to be helpful.
All right. Thanks, Marty. Again, my name is Mike Deaton. I am the Water Resources Director for Apex. We do oversee the town's stormwater program, as Marty mentioned, along with other programs such as water distribution and backflow program. We have sewer collection system, sewer treatment. We have infrastructure inspections. We have environmental sustainability, and of course our stormwater program. Our stormwater program was essentially started back in 2005 when the town received its National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, or NPDES permit from the state of North Carolina. It is a mandated federal permit requirement. It's unfunded from the federal government or the state government, and so we've been implementing this program since 2005. That permit has 6 minimum control measures. I won't go into all those, but it does oversee our stormwater control measure program, which you've probably seen in and around town in your subdivisions that your HOA looks over. We have our floodplain protection program, erosion control program, and our repair and buffer program. So that's a little bit about our stormwater program, and tonight's question and answer is about the stormwater utility fee that council has tasked town staff to implement. We went back through this process for almost a year now. It started back in February of 2021 with the annual council retreat, and full implementation will be January 1st, 2022. So we are close to that point now, and we'll be implementing that very soon. So it's a little bit about our program. We do have the online chat room to submit your questions in. I believe we have one already coming up. We have frequently asked questions that we'd like to go over as well, and then we have some questions that have already been submitted to the town that we will go over as well. So first, we do have a question here. My rainwater from my roof goes down my gutters onto my yard. Will this reduce my bill? If not, why not? I'll go ahead and answer that. We do have some experts here that Marty introduced. Yeah, the rainwater is coming off your roof. It is impervious surface. It does not infiltrate. It does run off, and even though it may run onto your yard, It's not, the clay soils in our area doesn't lead to a lot of infiltration. And the stormwater fee that we're implementing is based on impervious, not necessarily the percent impervious or the amount of grass that you have on your property. So at this point in time, the way the utility is being implemented, it will not reduce your bill. However, with that said, I know council has been interested in a program that would allow some type of credits. We will look into that into the future, but right now our program is just first to get off the ground. And so that's the answer there for that question. That's our first and only question so far in the chat room. We can, at this point, go through some of the frequently asked questions that we've got on our town website. And I'm going to turn it over to James Misciano, our field services supervisor, to answer the first question of what is stormwater.
So I am James Misciano. I am the field, I handle all the field services for the environmental programs, the stormwater programs here at the town of Apex. The question is, what exactly is stormwater? And essentially that is rainwater or melted snow that runs over impervious surfaces that doesn't infiltrate into the ground. This rain event doesn't have to come from a major or an epic event. It's your everyday rain events and even your larger ones. And if anyone would like me to elaborate any further, please let us know in the chat and I'll be happy to do so.
Continue with that. There's another question in the Q&A.
Yeah. Thanks, James. We do have another question in the chat room here, the Q&A. So lots of construction around town where builders have bad practices leading to environmental issues, plastic, trash, soil into storm drains. What enforcement can be made to force better cleanup? This construction is regulated under our NPDES Phase 2 permit and our construction runoff control program. So again, James Misciano handles that department, and I'm going to kick it over him for the answer.
Thanks, Mike. So when we have active development, new development here in the town of Apex, one of the things that we issue is a waste management plan. So when there are developers building homes, they're going vertical. As we know, there's a lot of construction site trash and debris. Through our inspection program, maintenance program, we ensure that developers, builders clean up their sites. There are procedures that go along with how we perform our inspections and the time that they have to mitigate the amount of trash and remove it that they have. But we do regulate it, we do enforce it if it's not taken care of, and we do it within the time constraints of our permit and our inspection program.
Thanks, James. No more questions in the chat room. We'll go. Is there one?
How is the cost per?
Oh, there it is. So the question is, how is the cost per household calculated? And so the cost per household, what we did is we went back and looked at our stormwater program only expenditures, and we ended up determining the number of subject properties around the town of Apex and individually delineated the impervious surface on each individual property, including single family homes. That was 22,000 homes. And so we essentially knew the total cost of the program. We knew the number of homes. We also did a GIS analysis of the average impervious across the town of Apex residential. That analysis yielded a number of 2,700 square feet for the average. That's what we call the equivalent residential unit. 2,700 square feet is the average amount of impervious in Apex residential property. So with that, those numbers known, we were able to essentially back calculate the cost per household that it would take to cover the expenses. And since we wanted to do a fair and equitable program and decided to go with a tiered rate, we were able to divide those homes into 4 different tiers and gave the amount equivalent to cover the expenditure cost. So long story short, that's how we got to the point of the current tiers and the current cost in the tiers per household. On the commercial side, we took the total impervious for the parcel and divided it by that average impervious of 2,700 square feet. That yielded the number of equivalent residential units. And so you take that equivalent residential unit number and multiply it by $5. And that is the non-residential fee. And that's how that was calculated. Let's see, we have another question. So commercial property with paved lots aren't assessed more than residential. That is incorrect. You pay based on the amount of impervious that you have. So the equivalent residential unit being 2,700, the total parcel, the total impervious for the commercial property, again, would pay the number of ERUs times that $5. So they do pay more if they have a more impervious. Again, it's a tiered rate structure. It's not a flat fee structure that some municipalities have done. The more you have, the more you pay. All right, we're going to move back from the chat room over to our frequently asked questions. And I'm going to turn this one over to Jessica Bolin. She is our Stormwater Program Manager. And Jessica, why should we be concerned about stormwater?
Hey, so I am Jessica Bolin, the Environmental Engineering Manager for the town of Apex. And we're concerned about stormwater because this stormwater that falls on the ground is not absorbed into the ground, and it runs over land to storm drains, which eventually goes to ditches, our ponds, streams, lakes, eventually the ocean. Along the way, all kinds of pollutants, are picked up by that stormwater, including, pet waste bacteria, fertilizers, motor oil from the streets. So in general, this stormwater utility fee that is going to begin January 1 is going to support programs that will help eliminate this pollution in the runoff from homes and businesses in order to keep our waterways clean.
Thanks, Jessica. The next question we have on our FAQ list is, what services does the fee pay for? And I've mentioned some of these programs that we already implement and have been implementing for a while. And that's compliance with our state and federally mandated NPDES stormwater permit, maintenance of our stormwater system, cleaning and repair of our stormwater system, street sweeping, investigation of drainage and flooding concerns, capital improvement projects, administration of the town's floodplain management program, and erosion control program is part of that phase 2 permit compliance. So that's where the fee will go towards. We got any more in the chat room? No. So I've got another question for James Michiano here. We've heard people ask about the difference between the stormwater and sewer systems. What's the difference, James?
Thanks, Mike. So these are 2 separate systems with distinct purposes. The sanitary sewer system collects water that comes from flushing toilets, shower drains, kitchen sink drains, things like that are in your home, water fountains, and such. And it delivers it to a water reclamation facility where it is treated. The stormwater system collects water that runs off of impervious surfaces and delivers it to the nearest creek, stream, lake, or pond. In some cases, it first flows to a nearby stormwater a stormwater measure like a stormwater pond, retention pond, detention facilities, infiltration basins, things of that nature, before it's delivered to a creek or stream, where it's treated by a facility that's engineered and designed with natural and environmental systems in it, plants, things like that, for pollutant removal. Thanks.
Thanks, James. Let's see. We've got some more questions in the chat room here. Let's see here. When planning stormwater infrastructure, is any consideration given to nature-based solutions such as bioswales, rain collection, etc., as well as gray infrastructure? I am going to turn this one over to Jessica Boland. She reviews new development plans when they come in and ensure that the post-construction program is being met along as well as our UDO requirements. So Jessica,
Yeah, that is correct. New development is required for anything over an acre of land disturbance to install a stormwater control measure, which is a nature-based solution to keep the stormwater clean. It's, there could be a wet pond, stormwater wetland, bioretention cell, which is like a large rain garden, underground detention systems, sand filters, all of those are required, and we regulate those throughout town. Currently, we have nearly 500 stormwater control measures in town, which, a majority of them are nature-based. Some of the ones that are in parking lots, underground detention, that's, a concrete solution, but mostly nature-based to help keep the stormwater clean. If somebody else wants to handle the gray infrastructure.
I'm assuming the gray infrastructure questions related to gray water collection of rainwater. I believe there are building code requirements that pertain to that. I'm not well versed in gray infrastructure. I don't know, Jessica or Jose, Marty, anybody? Yeah, so we can look into that, talk to building inspections and see what state building code allows us with respect to gray infrastructure. Another question we've got here from a gentleman. Are there any fertilizer restrictions for properties bordering lakes? I'll touch on that question. Nothing specific as far as the town of Apex is concerned. We do fall under the Jordan Lake rules. They've been promulgated by the state, not fully enacted for various reasons, but they do have requirements for training and for licensed applicators. So they are required to be fully trained and certified before applying fertilizers in and around water bodies within the Jordan Lake watershed portion of Apex. Let's see here. Next question in the chat room. There's no storm drain in my rural area. The runoff from my house does not enter any Apex system. Would I be charged a fee when no Apex service is provided? If you are in the town of Apex corporate limits and have impervious greater than 400 square feet, you would be charged a stormwater utility fee. Part of the town's storm sewer system isn't always just the pipes and the catch basins that you see in our right-of-ways. Our storm sewer system also includes, especially with respect to regulatory requirements, the water bodies such as Beaver Creek and Middle Creek and other named streams and tributaries were subject to that. So our phase 2 permit covers those water bodies as well. So even though your water may not be going into a town public collection system, it does end up in the water bodies which are regulated. So hopefully that answers your question there. Next question, why is it now necessary to have a separate fee when the cost was part of property taxes? And I am going to ask our Assistant Town Manager, Sean Purvis, to help assist with questions regarding property taxes in our budgeting process.
Yes, Mike. So the stormwater itself, the program could be handled either through a fee or through the taxes, and it has been handled through property taxes in the past. At this time, the council wanted to create a self-sustaining utility with the stormwater to make sure that money that was generated from stormwater, specifically from stormwater fees, was going to stormwater expenditures. So it's a better way, a more transparent way for us to account for revenues from stormwater and then specifically used for stormwater. We still had accountability through the tax revenue. It just was not as consistent and easily to see that it was a sustaining service, a self-sustaining service. So that would be one reason to switch to the fee. But it's optional. But this is how we felt this was a more transparent way to treat stormwater.
Thank you, Sean. Let's see, we've got another question in the chat room here. This person's a HOA board member in a neighborhood with a lake and multiple BMPs. What testing requirements should be part of the lake management plan? I'm going to turn this over to James Michiano, see if he knows the answer to that. We don't generally regulate lakes per se. If it's a stormwater control measure, then it would be subject to our UDO regulations, and I'm going to let James talk to you about those.
Great, thanks, Mike. Yes, when it comes to the BMPs, or also known as stormwater control measures, these being maybe constructed wetlands, wet ponds within your neighborhoods and throughout the town. Actually, currently we have almost 500 of them that are active. But when it comes to a pond or lake management plan, when a facility has been finally accepted, let's say it's a new development, it has been built, the town comes out, inspects it, we will accept it into the inventory. But even though it's owned by in this case, let's say the HOA, when all these things happen, they will get an operations and maintenance agreement from the town of Apex, which mandates what they need to do in reference to staying in compliance with the town, state, and then federal regulations. Part of the maintenance agreement is going to specify things like monthly maintenance, quarterly maintenance. So these are things they need to do throughout the year, and then annually, once the BMP or the SEM has been accepted by the town, it needs to be certified. It'll have an annual certification process where a professional like an engineer, a landscape architect, or a professional surveyor, someone with a license has to certify it, inspect it, and they send that documentation to us. It's all part of our stormwater database, where we manage this on a day-to-day basis. As far as a lake management plan or sampling, things of that nature is typically not mandated in an operations and maintenance agreement. There are areas of the state where they do have that, where they have nutrient sensitive waters, things like trout streams, things of that nature. But here in the town of Apex, we don't have anything that specifically requires anyone, like Mike spoke to earlier, in reference to fertilizers around lakes or sampling procedures. I hope that answers your question. And if you'd like us to elaborate further, please put that in the chat. I'd also would like to mention one thing. We've been talking a lot about impervious surfaces. Of course, these are surfaces that water does not infiltrate through. These are things like asphalt, concrete, rooftops. So just wanted to make that clear. Thank you.
Thanks, James. Get the next question in the Q&A. Does having a residential rainwater collection system affect the new charged fee for that household? The residential rainwater collection system, I'm assuming, is a private drainage system that's conveying private stormwater runoff into the public system. That's essentially just a conveyance system. At this point in time, though, that is not something that would be allowed as a credit per se, but I don't know if you heard the beginning of the presentation. That's something that council has indicated they would be interested in looking at and that's something that we'll consider doing on down the road. Let's see here. The next question I have, what kind of fees are individual single-family homeowners going to see? Maybe a range value like about $50 or something would be helpful. Will the property tax be adjusted now that this is being split into a separate fee? Let's see. We do have a fee schedule. I don't know if you've been able to see that on our website. I have the ranges here. So residential rates, monthly rate for tier 1, which is generally our smaller homes, anywhere from 400 to 1,500 square feet, you're looking at $1.50 a month fee, or about $18 annually. We go into the medium tier, that's about $5 a month or $60 annually. Large is anywhere from 3,000 to 4,000 square feet of impervious. That's about $7.50 a month, or about $90 annually. And then we have an extra large tier, or tier 4, that's greater than 4,000 square feet. Remember, the more you have, the more you pay. That's $10 per month, or approximately $120 annually. So the second half of your question, will the property tax be adjusted now that this is being split into a separate fee? I'm going to ask Sean Purvis again to answer that question.
All right. Thanks, Mike. To answer the question about the property taxes, we also had 3 other questions come in advance. So and they all kind of tied to the same thing. So I'll address those and this at the same time. So as Mike mentioned, there is the fees, and you heard the annual amounts. Council did elect to reduce the property tax ultimately by 1 cent on the property tax rate. And so, but since this fee is going into effect in half our fiscal year, what they did was for this current fiscal year, which our fiscal year is July 1 to June 30th, they reduced the tax rate by ½ cent this year. And then next year, the plan is to reduce it another ½ cent. So ultimately, it'll be a full penny reduction on the tax rate to offset some of the stormwater fees. The effect on each household of this just depends on the value of your home. So it will, it'll range. The easiest way to decide to find out what that reduction is to take the value of your home, divide it by 100, and then multiply by 1 cent. And then that'll give you the annual reduction that you should see on your tax bill as a result of that reduction in the tax rate. To find your home value, if you don't know it, you can visit the Wake County tax office and search your address, and your assessed value is on that tax bill. We will provide a link for that on our stormwater page, so you have easy access to that. And then from there, you could compare that to the tier that your home falls into that Mike mentioned, which is already on the stormwater page as well. And that would give you the comparison to see the reduction in your tax bill versus the stormwater fee. I think that, yeah, and that pretty much, I think that covers everything on the tax rate.
Thanks, Sean. We've got another question. Is algacide treatment of a stormwater pond considered to be an illicit discharge? I'm going to ask James Misciano, who oversees our illicit discharge program, to answer that question.
Thanks, Mike. So for those out there who don't know what an illicit discharge is, that is something that is prohibited from entering into a storm drain, a catch basin, a water course. That could be a stream, a creek, or any type of body of water here within the town of Apex. So when it comes to algicides, for whether it's a natural pond or a stormwater retention pond, it is not an illicit discharge. It needs to be applied. Of course, all these type of herbicides need to be applied with someone with a like a wetland license. They have to be a professional. They don't have to come to us when it comes to maintenance for permission when they do apply these, but that is a common practice, especially because algae is something that is very dangerous and it could be unhealthy. So it's a common practice to apply these algicides and even pond dyes. This is another thing that comes up a lot. where pond dyes are essentially usually either black or a blue color, and people will be concerned about it and contact us. But all the safety data sheets, material safety data sheets, these are harmless practices that are used here in the town of Apexes by these maintenance companies that maintain these facilities. And again, it's not prohibited. Thank you.
All right, thanks, James. Sorry about that. We do have what appears to be a follow-up question about the private drainage system, if it would be eligible for, I guess, a reduction of the fee. What about a rain barrel collection system, since it doesn't allow runoff of rainwater? Again, that is something, a rain barrel collection system can be effective for small stormwater events, depending on the size of the rain barrel. But at this point, we do not have a program in place that allows for credits such as rain barrels. But again, council has indicated that that is something that they would like staff to look at in the future, and rain barrels would obviously be something that we would evaluate. Thanks. All right. I believe, well, it looks like there's another question here about tax credits. Let's see. Do you have an estimated difference between tax credit and the new fee for typical residential household? I'm going to send this over to Sean Purvis once again. Thanks, Sean.
And I want to be careful about how we phrase tax credit, because it means that, something different in terms of if you're an accountant versus what you're here. Now there's an offset in your property tax rate with council's reduction of the tax rate by ultimately a penny. The easiest way again to do that comparison is to get the value of your home divided by 100 multiplied times a penny. That'll be the reduction that you'll see annually on your tax bill as a result from that tax rate, the change in the tax rate, and then compare that to what tier that your home falls into for the stormwater fee. And again, both the tier structure is online, as well as the access to the county tax administration office to find out your value. There is a map on our stormwater fee page as well that you can go to, and you can identify exactly what tier your house is in. To get as a point of reference, though, I'll say most homes fall into our tier 2, which is a 1,501 square feet to 3,000 square foot impervious surface. That's a $5 monthly fee or $60 annually. Now, just as a quick analysis, the break even point for that tier then would be $600. If your home was $600,000, then you would also pay $60 a year in stormwater, versus what your reduction you're seeing in your tax bill was $60 a year on the 1 penny. So that in that case, it's a 1-for-1. However, what the actual difference will be depends on what tier you're in and what the value of your home is.
Thank you, Sean. I'm going to flip back to some of the questions that we received earlier this week. They were pre-submitted questions. This one I'm going to send to our Public Works and Utilities Director, Jose Martinez. Jose, I have a question about stormwater running through my backyard. Why were drainage rocks not put in my backyard at the sewage easement to stop erosion? I can't afford to buy a truckload of rocks to cut down on the erosion. It should have been done when the house was built.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, that's actually a good question. It's very difficult to answer, though, because we don't know the specifics of how the original design was laid out and how it was constructed. But first, I'd like to say 2 points. One is, if there is any kind of erosion in your backyard with a sanitary sewer easement, please contact us in town. You can do it one of 2 ways. You either can call it the Public Works main number, or you can go online and there's an incognito form or a form that you can submit any kind of questions for or issues. So in this case, if there's a problem with the sanitary sewer easement, we would come out and we would investigate it. And if there is erosion that's affecting our infrastructure, we will address it. We got to make sure that the sanitary sewer easements always have access for state rules and state regulations. So that's the first part. The second part is streams by their very nature are dynamic. So we don't know how the original design was done, but for instance, it could have been designed correctly, it could have been built correctly, and it could have used vegetation to stop the erosion from occurring. And 10 years down the road, the vegetation could have died, or there could be much more water going into the stream, which changes the dynamics of it. So a stream naturally will migrate. So because of not knowing the specifics of this question, it's really hard to answer why it wasn't designed a certain way originally. But if there is erosion, again, give the town a call or go online and submit a request, and we'll come out and we'll investigate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Jose. I appreciate that. Let's see, another previously submitted question. This is related to a lot of the drainage investigations that we do. So James Michiano is our field services supervisor again, and he is a person who typically handles these types of requests. So the question was, for HOA managed communities in Apex, who is responsible for the upkeep around the storm drains and the walkways, the footpaths adjacent to these storm drains? If residents next to a storm drain see water overflowing onto walkways and footpaths, is Apex town responsible for fixing either the storm drain or the walkway height from the surface of the road where storm drain is situated? James, how would we handle that?
Thanks, Mike. So if there is an issue with a public yard inlet or a public sidewalk, then please contact the town to investigate. Please note that in many instances, yard inlets and internal sidewalk paths are typically privately owned and then would be maintained by the owner, in which case it may be an HOA. In these instances, please contact the town first, and we will determine who the owner of the infrastructure is. You know, basically, when it comes down to it, you know, there are public issues and there are private ones. So when we do have infrastructure, storm, you know, whether it could be a separated pipe or things like sinkholes or infrastructure like the storm drains and catch basins, if it's publicly owned, we will respond immediately as soon as we are apprised of it. Hope that helps. Thank you.
Thank you, James. And how many drainage investigations do we typically do in a year span?
Thanks, Mike. So when it comes to responding to drainage concerns here in the town of Apex, we have been averaging between 250 and 300 a year, where we actually will physically respond, assess the situation, and bring about a resolution.
And just one kind of follow up on that, James, if you will, how can HOAs be proactive and support the town's initiative with the state mandated stormwater program? What would you tell HOAs? What's one of the best things they can do to help us out?
So the best thing you can do to help out the town is, one, of course, notify us if you do see an issue with these type of devices. If you have a stormwater retention pond, like I mentioned earlier, it could be one of the other facilities that we've mentioned. But let us know if there's an issue. We would like to come out and check on it. When it comes to things that you may see when it comes to active development, you know, we have a very robust soil and erosion program. Some of you may know we were nominated #1 with the best program in the state this last year. But we want to respond to these things immediately. So notifying us of anything that you see, having an additional set of eyes is a great asset to us. Also, hire the proper people when it comes to maintaining these facilities. So if you are an HOA and you have several stormwater retention ponds out there, it's always good to look for try to work with multiple companies and see which one might fit you best. Pond maintenance companies are sometimes better than a typical landscape crew. But there's a lot of different things that can be done. Notifying us of trash, things like that you see. Removing trash, if you have trash that's on your property, or if it's in a common area that the HOA doesn't mind people walking, or it could be trails, please pick up trash and dispose of it properly if you can. When it comes to some other like best management practices that you can do, what's nice is when it comes to car washes, we sort of recommend that people use car washes. We have a few here in the great town of Apex, and one thing that a lot of people don't realize is that car washes recycle most of their water. And not only do they recycle the water, the chemicals are disposed of properly. So even though it might be an allowable use where people can wash cars at home, we still have those chemicals that are going into the stormwater system. So we do recommend people use car washes if they can and support our local community. But if you do wash your car at home, try to do it in a manner where the stormwater runoff might drain onto your lawn or another surface that might allow for a little infiltration so the bacteria can eat up some of those chemicals. There are lots of other devices, and I can talk probably for an hour on this subject, but please, contact us online. We'd be happy to answer any more questions that you have on things that you can do. And also look at our Stormwater Tips webpage that we have on our town website. Thank you.
Thank you, James. I don't see any new questions in the chat. Going back to our town website and our frequently asked questions, there's some of these on our website that haven't been asked tonight. And I'm going to ask Jessica Boland to answer some of these frequently asked questions. How often will town customers be billed, Jessica?
Town residents, they'll get a bill monthly with their utility bill, with their water and sewer and trash recycling bill. It'll just be another line item on that same bill.
Let's see, how did we, I touched on that a little bit, but what was some of the process that we went through to determine the impervious surfaces, or what kind of applications did we survey that, or how did we come up with that?
I guess you and I can answer together, but it was a GIS exercise. We had several staff members looking at that, the latest GIS aerial photography, and delineated every parcel by hand.
Yeah, again, that was approximately 22,000 single family homes that Apex staff was able to find time and delineate that impervious surface on each individual lot. So that was quite the undertaking, and that's what it takes to have a tiered rate system versus just a flat rate where everybody pays the same. We talked about the equivalent residential unit. That's a FAQ on our website. Okay, Jessica, how would a property owner know how much impervious surface they would have if they wanted to, I don't know, double check?
So we do have the GIS application. There's a map on our stormwater utility fee website, the web page there with all the FAQs, where you can actually, type in your address and it'll pull up the results of that GIS delineation, the impervious delineation that we did, and it'll show you the total impervious surface that you have on your lot and what tier you do fall into for billing.
All right. Thanks, Jessica. I don't see any more questions coming up in our chat room. I know we've got a few, 14 more minutes left in this Q&A event. James, you said you could talk for an hour. Let's see, tell us a little bit about our NPDES Phase 2 program, all the 6 minimum measures. Just briefly summarize those so our customers can understand, what that involves.
Sure, thanks, Mike. So as Mike mentioned earlier, we were issued back in 2005 what they call this National Pollution Discharge Elimination System permit. That permit requires us to have what these 6 minimum measures he's talking about are actual physical programs. So there's 6 programs that at a minimum we must have in order to maintain compliance with state regulations. And the town of Apex does get audited by the state to make sure that we are maintaining compliance and doing what they want us to do, along with new things that they would like to see us doing. This is actually one of those things that a lot of municipalities have when it comes to stormwater utility fees, and the town of Apex is finally just getting around to it. When it comes to the 6 minimum measures that we have, the first one we have is what we call a public education and outreach, where my staff and I, and along with others, we go out into the public where we're educating them on what stormwater is, what we can do to help out, the programs that we have. So it's just an educational opportunity to teach our children, but even with people our age, it's about changing behaviors and informing people on what our stormwater system is. The second program we have is public involvement and participation. This is where the public will get volunteers that want to help out the town of Apex and keeping it clean, keeping us at the peak. And then some of those programs are things like storm drain markings. You might have seen some of the storm drains out in your neighborhoods that have little markers on them, little colorful markers that might say something like drains to Beaver Creek or drains to Jordan Lake. For those of you that not know, our drinking water supply comes from Jordan Lake. So all of our majority of our stormwater runoff in this town goes to and eventually gets to Jordan Lake, where we're pulling our drinking water from. We also do things like litter sweeps and stream cleanups, trying to keep trash and debris away from our stream channels and things of that, where they'll directly impact our water quality. So we also have the illicit discharge detection and elimination program. Spoke to about this a little bit earlier. This is where there are things that are prohibited from getting into what we call the MS4, which is our municipal separate storm sewer system. This is your network of storm sewers that run throughout the town. Also, all of the water bodies and water courses. Anything that basically conveys a stormwater runoff into a stream, creek, pond, or lake is considered here a water of the state. So it's jurisdictional. Most of them are protected, and we don't want any type of pollutants getting to them. And there are reporting procedures and stuff. But in reference to the illicit discharge program, we also enforce this as well. So when there are impacts, it could be something as simple as someone pouring something illegally down into a storm drain. It can be intentional, and it also can be accidental. So even if something's accidental, we still got to make sure that it's mitigated and cleaned up. So we see that through A to Z. If we find something, we assess it, whether it's small scale, large scale, we ensure that it's remediated and cleaned up. We also have, you might have heard the term soil and erosion a couple of times this evening, or just in general. We call it, we'll basically have construction site runoff control program, but this is our soil and erosion program here at the town of Apex. For those of you who don't know, town of Apex has a lot of development that's going on. We are the peak of good living, as many know. We were rated #1 with Money Magazine. So development has been off the charts here in the town of Apex. And the truth is, the #1 pollutant to our water sources in the state of North Carolina is actually sediment. A lot of people might think it's contaminants and things from cars of that nature, but sediment is the #1 pollutant in the state of North Carolina to our water sources. So these programs are imperative to our water quality here in Apex. So when it comes to the soil and erosion program, if you're driving around Apex and you see these large active construction sites or even small ones, you'll notice you might see things like orange and black fencing around these projects. You might see a lot of stone along curb edges and things of that nature. You might see things that look like really nasty looking ponds, and they may eventually be a permanent stormwater retention pond. But these are all temporary measures to basically contain and dewater stormwater as best we can and keep it as clean as possible. It's very difficult here in the town of Apex. We have what we call Triassic soil. So many of you might see the red clay everywhere. If you wanted to make bricks, the town of Apex is probably a good place. But when it comes to this red clay, even with the best practices that we have out on the ground, and I did mention earlier that we do have the #1 program in the state, we're still going to get what we call highly turbid water. So you might see what appears to be very cloudy or dirty water in some of the streams and creeks here in the town of Apex, and that is due to our soil conditions. So that is a very large program that we have multiple staff members. We're doing physical inspections every day. We're looking at these active construction sites. I know we talked a little bit earlier about the waste management plan, and people want to know if we can, how and we can enforce these. And we do inspections, we do enforcement. Of course, with these type of things, there are time restraints. I just want to be honest, because we get that a lot. When it does come to things like trash, our inspectors can go out there and write a report, but it's not like we can initially fine people if they don't pick it up right away. There are time limits that the state regulates, and we have to allow due diligence to make these things happen. We also have the post-construction program. This is where we have these, as I mentioned earlier, these 500 different facilities, these stormwater control measures. These are things like Jessica mentioned, wet ponds, some of them are dry ponds. All these devices are meant to, treat stormwater as best we can before we discharge it to these streams, creeks, lakes, and ponds. With that program, this is another robust program that we have. As of right now, we're currently managing over 500 facilities. We receive reports on them every single day. We have field inspectors actually out on the ground looking at these facilities, because even though they're required to send us in an annual certification, we feel it's best in the town's interest where we're actually seeing them on a regular basis as well. So as we see failures, we can notify the homeowner, the owner, the private homeowners or the HOAs of failures that we see, and that way they can take action immediately. There's also, we have a lot, that number of 500 is actually going to grow dramatically over the next few years. There's a good chance we're going to have over several hundred within about 3 years from now, maybe even sooner. So we continue to have to grow and have staff out there to take care of these and get eyes on the ground per se. The other program that we have, the minimum measure that we have is Good Housekeeping Program. And with this Good Housekeeping Program is pollution prevention and good housekeeping. Part of that involves things like you may have seen the street sweepers out there. The town, of course, has a street sweeping program where they're out there cleaning our streets. We also inspect all the town-owned facilities. So any facility that we have that may have the potential to impact stormwater, places that might have generators that could possibly leak, things that get maintained all the time. We look at every single one of these facilities annually. We do reports, and we report everything to the state as well with our annual reporting. So those are just the 6 minimum measures. Of course, with that, there are other things like TMDLs where we're looking at nutrient loads and such. We do have a riparian buffer program where we're out doing stream determinations, stream calls with like environmental assessments where developers and builders want to come in here and build in the town of Apex. We're actually, we go out there and check everything that they're submitting to us for our jurisdictional streams. So that's just my quick 5-minute spiel. But at any time you would like any more information or details in reference to any of these programs, we'd be happy to let you know. Thank you.
All right, thanks, James. You aren't kidding. Let's see here. We've got some more questions in the Q&A. James, this question is about the storm drain marking program. Question is, all the markers on the storm drains in my neighborhood that said they drained the waterways came off. They were glued on. Can we get them replaced?
Yes, we can. So yes, contact, if you go on the town website, you look up on the water resources, environmental engineering, you will see where we have the information there where you can contact me. There are different things that we do in order to get that in motion, mapping, seeing the need, having the supplies on hand for the different watersheds. But you contact me and I'll be happy to get you on the right path. We do slow down a little bit when it comes to the winter, simply because of the adhesive material. Basically under 50 to 60 degrees doesn't work well, and it's not recommended that we put it on. But we are very active with that program, typically from April through November. But I'll be happy to help you out with that and discuss in the future. And of course, we would like them to stay on as long as possible.
Thanks, James. One more from the chat room. The barriers, this is about our erosion control program. The barriers, the silt fence put in before construction do fail at times, leading to quite a bit of soil runoff. Can we require straw bales to help support them?
Great question, by the way. See that one a lot. So there's a lot to say there. When it comes to these, what we call silt fencing or combination fencing, it is designed to handle a certain amount of stormwater that straw bales simply would not be able to. They can handle a certain amount of concentrated flow and large amounts of surface flow that are hitting them. And when it comes to straw bales, they are a best management practice in soil and erosion when it comes to different types of things, especially also when it comes to remediation efforts and removing contaminants. But it's a good practice when it comes for, say, ground coverage, where we're looking for germination, we're looking to seed down some areas, things of that nature. But when it comes to an actual stormwater control measure to contain sediment and stormwater runoff, it's not by any means the best practice. So I hope that helps explain that.
Thank you, James. We got a follow-up to that question regarding the erosion control program. When can a builder remove the barriers or silt fence? We have a builder that has significant runoff, making the sidewalk slippery when wet.
Thanks, Mike. Great question. So when it comes to these the silt fencing in particular here, what we may call a perimeter control measure, when it comes to these active permits, we like to keep those in place as long as possible. We do ensure that they're all removed at the end of a project, but if they're actually disturbing soil in an area, we want to have some sort of soil and erosion control measure in place to contain and possibly treat that water. So we do allow developers and builders to remove silt fencing throughout the life of a project. And of course, this is typically going to be in areas where people have moved in and purchased their homes. They've now gotten what we call our certificate of occupancy. So the developers will remove those lot measures, which could be silt fencing, from around the lot, and maybe even in a corridor that could be behind the property. But we want to make sure that those corridors and those areas are 100% or permanently stable. The minute they still have disturbed soil going on, we want to see those measures in place. And the end all to it is when the project is over and maybe the last couple of houses are being built, you might see the final lift of the asphalt go down on the streets where the roads are now have been completed. At that point in time, we will tell them to remove them because we don't want some of these measures left in place. So we will tell them to remove them. We will do a final inspection. Our environmental engineering department has inspectors that go out there and do what we call a completion like an inspection. And we will actually map out everything that we find and have the owners remove them. And then when they remove them, they'll have to stabilize those areas. So there's a lot more I could say there, but the truth simply is we keep them where they are needed. And at the end of the project, we make sure that everything is removed when the area is stable. Hope that answers your question.
Thanks, James. We've got two additional questions that came in. Let's see here. Homes in established neighborhoods, will there be a new cost? And the answer is yes, there would be a new cost. This would apply to all Apex property owners who have impervious that's greater than 400 square feet. Second question is, will the stormwater utility fees be assessed to individual homeowners or will it go to HOA? And the answer is both. Actually, individual homeowners will be billed on the basis of the impervious on their individual lot, and the HOAs will be billed separately based on the impervious for their amenity centers and common areas that have impervious surface that exceed 400 square feet. So that's the answer to that question. And with that, I believe that's all the questions that we've received through our Q&A, through our online system. And with that said, I do appreciate your time, and I'm going to kick it over to Marty Stone and let him wrap this up. Thank you.
So thanks everyone for joining us here this evening for our first webinar question and answer session live. We did have a few glitches, but we worked our way through them. So thank you for joining us. We appreciate your questions. You should be seeing on the screen the email, phone number, and information. If you have more questions, please post them there or reach out to one of the individuals that were here tonight answering questions, and we will get you an answer. Again, thanks everyone for joining us. Happy holidays and have a nice evening. Thank you.